Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Jeremy Siskind. I'm the author of the Jazz Piano Fundamentals series, playing solo jazz piano, and maybe this will be the last time I plug my class at Fullerton College, because after this it's going to be a little tricky to register, but I'll put info about that in the description. So, it's a new year. New year, of course, it's time for some goal setting. Maybe some of you are here because your New Year's resolution is to learn jazz piano or to really double down on jazz piano or to focus on jazz piano. And so I wanted to talk about some methods of learning and pursuing jazz piano. Actually, not really methods of doing it, but ways to think about it, because I think it's such a hard thing to learn. It draws upon so many different skill sets, so many different parts of your brain, so many different elements. And some of you who know me really well, or have just followed this channel for a long time, know that I'm involved heavily in learning Spanish. It's a big passion of mine, and it started for me 2 years ago as a New Year's resolution. It was 2022 New Year's. So I've been doing it for 2 years. I've taken about 100 hours of private lessons. I probably spend an hour to two every day working in Spanish, and I still am so far from being a native speaker. And so reflecting on that experience, reflecting on working with some of my jazz piano students, I thought I would give you 3 frameworks for thinking about how to learn jazz piano. So let's see, I'm going to do some drawing today. I'm a great artist, guys. Really, really good. So the first drawing is one thing that learning jazz piano or a language is not, which is linear, right? I think we all imagine that the best kind of learning is linear learning, right? You learn step 1, you learn step 2, you learn step 3, you learn step 4. And every time you feel better about it, you're getting better. And by the time you reach step 100, then you'll be good to go, right? This is not how learning jazz piano goes. It is not how learning a language goes. And I think most things that are really valuable, probably it is not going to be how they go. I heard an interview recently with the CEO of Duolingo. I am an everyday Duolingo user, and even he says our app is pretty good at getting people to read Spanish. It's decent at getting them to understand Spanish, and it does not help them speaking Spanish. And Duolingo is the most linear thing I think that you could imagine in terms of language learning, but it's limited. So what are some other models that we can think about if learning isn't linear? And by the way, I should say, this book, these Jazz Piano Fundamentals book, I have tried to lay out so that they are as linear as possible. Because I know our brains all kind of want that. We feel good when we can move from one thing to the other. So I really like to think about this first concept here is a network. Right? A network of connections. And I find that this, when I'm finding the connections between things and concepts in a language, this is where I feel like my level of advancement is not going word by word, but it's exploding. And this is actually so relevant for jazz piano, because theory-wise, there's these concepts that keep reappearing in different phases. And so the more that you can kind of grasp, this works here and it also works here, the better. In both language learning and jazz piano learning, one of the things that we're always doing is moving between the specific and the general, right? In this specific sentence, we go noun, verb, object, right? And then I can use that formula generally. Same thing in jazz piano. We want to learn the specific tune, but then we want to understand the underpinnings, how they work, the theory, the progression, so that when we see these things in another tune, they go much faster. Okay, so I think it's really useful to think of these things as a network, and one of the things that means to me, if you can't learn linearly, I think it is healthy to learn from more than one source. And maybe more so than more than one source, I would say more than one modality. So it's not that you should watch my YouTube channel and also Open Studio's YouTube channel and another YouTube channel, although maybe. But it's more that you should watch my YouTube channel, of course, and then play in an ensemble that coach, get to your community college, play in an ensemble, and then have a jam session, and then have a listening session with friends, and try to get a few different modalities in, because they're all going to inform each other and create this network. And to me, this is much more, rather than that straight line, this is much more what that network looks like. Now, I will say, for me, there's kind of a possible variation of this, which is like a tunnel and then side tunnels, or we could think of it as like a freeway and then turnoffs. And so for me, what I do, how I think about my Spanish learning is, every day I'm learning Duolingo, and then I'm going to all these other sources. I'm having private lessons. I'm listening to podcasts. And I hear some of the same things, but I'm always kind of coming back to that linear Duolingo journey. And so that makes it both, I get that linear part of my brain that really wants to feel progress, like it scratches that itch. But I also kind of see things in other places and encounter them in other ways. And that's actually really my hope with these books, is that people use them as that straight line through. And then they also go out and they play with friends. They listen to recordings. They go out to the jazz club and talk to musicians and get tips. And they go off and then they come back and say, oh, that thing that Jeremy said, this guy was saying this related thing, but in another way. And that actually helps me inform something. So we could also think of it as a tunnel with side tunnels or turnoffs. Cool. Good. And my hope actually with the book too, I don't mean for this to be a book plug, honestly, that wasn't the plan, is that I'm also pointing you to other sources, especially with the guided listenings, in order to have you learning in some different modalities as you play. Okay, great. Notice I said one of the modalities was playing with others, and that is so important. Just like if you want to speak Spanish, you're going to have to speak with some Spanish speakers, even if it's scary and you fall on your face a million times. If you want to learn jazz, you're going to have to play with other jazz musicians, even if it's scary and you fall on your face a few times. Okay. Another way that people think about learning, I've heard described as like the spiral method, where you keep going over the same thing again and again, but each time see it anew and in more depth. And this is so relevant to jazz learning and language learning, right? I was thinking about the pentatonic scale, right? Which I think it would be very legitimate. I don't teach this way, but it would be very legitimate for people to use pentatonic scale in their very first jazz lesson, right? It's kind of one of these scales where you can't play a wrong note. Everything sounds good, right? But I'm just finishing up my third level, writing the third level jazz piano fundamentals. And the pentatonic scale is one of these things that just keeps coming back in these different ways. And so one of the things that I hope, that creates the feeling of is like, I don't have to master it the first time I see it. And I think that's very true. And one of the places where I see people getting caught up is feeling like they have to stick with one thing until they're an absolute master of it. And in jazz especially, that's really not true. It doesn't mean do a sloppy job. It doesn't mean don't challenge yourself or try. But, for instance, let's take the Charleston rhythm. One of the first things that's presented in my books. Right? So I think in the books, I tell you to practice this with every different major scale. In eighth notes and in triplets. And then maybe to choose 3 different jazz tune melodies and play them while comping with the Charleston rhythm. So maybe you're going to choose Autumn Leaves. And you're going to play Bye Bye Blackbird, and then you're going to choose a more eighth notey tune and you're going to try to play. And the end goal, of course, would be to be able to do that Charleston while you're improvising, while you're playing any tune, just off the cuff whenever you want. That's what we're going for. But, if you're still just in your first few months or weeks of playing jazz, it's probably not going to happen right off the bat. But as you learn more tunes, you learn more rhythmic variations, you learn more coordination, you learn more scales, you're going to keep doing that Charleston rhythm. And, maybe a few weeks in the future, that Charleston rhythm, you could just do that with your eyes closed while you're half asleep. Right? Because you're going to keep going around that spiral as you learn new things. So do the assignments, but don't expect to gain mastery right away. Keep going on the spiral, learning more complex things, engaging your brain in new ways. And what was once hard will become only sort of hard. And then it will become medium hard. And then it will become sort of easy, then medium easy. And eventually it'll become something that you don't have to think about. Now that process might take a really long time. I'm not here to tell you that learning something like jazz is going to be easy. I'm here to tell you the opposite, that if you're going to do it, get in it for the long haul, because it's not going to happen overnight. Okay, so the spiral method. Any concept, you're not going to get it right away. You have to kind of live with it in discomfort. And then as you keep going around that spiral, it'll get more and more comfortable until it becomes second nature. But it takes a long time. All right, and our third concept I call scaffolding. So one thing that I think is very common or very similar between language learning and jazz piano learning is that our goal is to get it into our subconscious, right? I don't want to have to think about verb conjugation when I'm working on my Spanish. If I'm talking to somebody, I don't want to be thinking, okay, here's that verb ending. I don't want to be thinking about masculine, feminine matching. I don't want to have to be thinking about parts of grammar. But the reality is, of course, until I have the skill, that's what I'm going to have to think about. Same thing with jazz. If you listen to experts talking, they're going to say, well, you want to play from your heart. You want to play from the tradition. You want to play things that you're hearing. And yes, but if you're not there yet, then you kind of have to fake it for a while. And so I look at a lot of teaching as building the scaffolding for the building. And the scaffolding is going to be, I don't want to say faking it, but it's going to be having to use your more intellectual brain. It's going to be really thinking about what scale you're using, really thinking about articulation and rhythm, really thinking about, what exactly you're listening to, what you're responding to, about the form of the tune, right? All this stuff takes a lot of time to get into your subconscious. But little by little, as you got that scaffolding up, you're going to be building up that building. And so, sometimes it feels like the actual learning is what happens while you're just practicing again and again. And I try to always give my students little challenges so that they're inspired to practice, that the scaffolding is still intriguing for them, right? That intellectual side is still intriguing. They have slightly new challenges every week, because what they're doing actually is they're on that scaffolding and they are building the building at the same time. So, I sometimes get students who rightfully say, well, I watched this YouTube video, I listened to this podcast, and they say that we should only be playing what we hear. And yes, that is the building that you're building. But until you can do that, you're going to have to build up that scaffolding at the same time. And I think it's healthy to know that that's the case. And eventually, you tear down the scaffolding completely. I don't want you thinking about scales. I don't want you thinking about arpeggios. I don't want you thinking about the form. I just want you playing what you hear, playing what you feel, and engaging on that emotional level. Some final thoughts as I wrap up. First of all, thank you for watching and Happy New Year. But I was thinking about, if you are under 25, you are in such a privileged position to learn. For those of us who are now, sadly, over 25, our brains are so much less elastic, which means learn now. You are going to be able to be a native speaker of this music or of a language or whatever it is that you choose to learn in ways that is really, really a struggle once you get older. Now, on the other hand, if you're over 25, or if you're like me, really old, learn now, because your brain needs it, right? Your brain needs new challenges in order to stay flexible. And goals are great. Have those goals, but also try to really enjoy the process and what it's doing for you and doing for your brain, just to stay challenged, to stay intrigued. That's how I feel about my Spanish study. I love having something where I can make progress, where I'm a learner rather than a knower. And, don't be in a rush to achieve anything. Doesn't mean don't be ambitious, don't try hard, don't put in the time, but see how much you can enjoy this learning process. So wishing you all just so much success in your jazz journey. I'm honored for those of you who allow me to be a part of it. And I'll hopefully see you a lot in the new year.